And another thing, you're ugly.
Breaking Bad, Last of Us, Game of Thrones, Red Dead Redemption. What do all of these have in common? Good characters, entrenched worlds. To me, a sense of gravity. Each and every one of these stories feels grounded. They feel realistic. But when we have a horde of mushroom monsters and literal dragons, realistic is not really the thing you'd ascribe to these, right? But I mean reality in the terms of believability and less the case of literal realism. When a character is being held up in Red Dead, I can believe that their life is really on the line.
Without us, you have nothing.
When Gus is holding his crew on the threat of death, that threat is real because I know the story has established death, even for major characters, to be real and permanent. In The Last of Us, death is not only an important factor but an element of tragedy against the characters, which seems obvious, but maybe isn't so much after a deeper look. See the death of any mentor character. Oogway, Yoda, Qui-Gon, Gandalf, Tenzin, and so many more. In most, if not all cases, the mentor's death is set to push the trainee past their limits and force them to run, rather than timidly walk with a hand on the shoulder. Obvious, right? But what about the death of a love interest, of a family member? True loss. Sometimes this can be a staging post for a character to build their motivations up from, like the Dark Knight or the assassin Ezio Auditore, but instead it can be a motivator. Either motivation in the way of fear, such as the death of Victor in the episode Box Cutter, or motivation on the path of reinforcement, like Dominic Santiago.
It's okay, Marcus. It's okay. Come on. We gotta go now. Your father still needs us.
The mark of bad writing, in my opinion, is when a death is not used to strike for tragedy, but as a shock factor. Don't mishear me. A death used for the shock of a scene can be effective if the goal is to frighten and harass the viewer to put them on edge. But in most cases, a character might die just so the story can feel like it has some sense of edge or gravity. But like most stories in modern media, it's hollow and built on sticks. A death cannot put you on edge if it's endlessly predictable. These stories play as if to trick you into thinking a character in a movie named after the character is ever in any danger whatsoever. Or worse, a death made to force your hand into feeling sympathetic.
Oh, God damn it.
For this, I look to the choice in Gears of War 5. Controversial for those in the fanbase, and from the perspective of the player, it runs out incredibly contrived. Save the last main character, Marcus' son, or the side comic relief character who has no stake in the story. Let alone the fact that the game up to this point has not taken death seriously, giving 4 separate characters fake-out deaths, and then suddenly expects the player to care so much more about this choice because the scene requires the characters to put themselves in a precarious position for no reason. Compared to the other entries in Gears of War, this makes Gears 4 and 5 feel weak on a foundational level, something I fear will remain in the 6th entry. Characters often were introduced and killed to establish either the strength of your enemy or to drive other characters further. Min is killed to introduce Rom as a strategic leader. Ty is killed to contrast the most badass cog soldier versus the Locust regime. Alicia is killed to motivate Jace into the fight. Prescott dies to further the main plot of Gears of War 3 forward. Dom dies at the behest of Marcus, and so on. In Gears of War 4 and 5, a single character is not killed by the villains until the very end of the game. Oscar is faked out. Reyna is mercied to push Kate onward. Lizzie dies to demonstrate JD's story. Marcus is faked out. Cole is faked out. Every death is internal to the human characters, which I can celebrate the writing for, but it continues to undermine the threat of the villains until this contrived death at the end of 5. And Jack doesn't count. He's died twice already.
Who gives a shit? He's a robot.
That's not his fault. Gotcha.
That being said, I don't think making choices over main characters dying and living in a game are always going to be bad. For example, I'd point out Wolfenstein: The New Order. Between Wyatt and Fergus, the choice is not contrived, but establishes many things while keeping you in the shoes of the character. It establishes the threat of the villain at the very beginning of the game, and making you choose between two allies gives you a splash of hatred to carry against the enemies for the remainder of the story. It gives you a motivation for vengeance, as well as giving you a personal dilemma that applies much better. Do you save the green as grass recruit, who has much more to live but hasn't proved themselves yet on the field? Or do you save the grizzled veteran who knows themselves and their skills better, but has less left to fight for, besides the fight? Do you fight to save innocence, or fight with everything you can, no matter the sacrifice? This is the contrast Gears 5's choice about picking your favorite character at the end of the day. There's no real reason rooted in the world of the game to make you favor one over the other, giving the choice just about as much depth as any of the factions in Fallout 4.
It's Foz, right?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Shut the fuck up, Foz.
Yeah, sir.
You may be asking, how does one combat such a failure in writing?
Hang on a second, shitstick.
Shit stick. Del, theories?
I don't know. Maybe a stick made out of shit?
For starters, make death real. What I mean by this is that in order for death to be a tangible threat, characters dying must be consistent. Characters die and they stay dead. If a character dies or appears to die and is simply brought back in a fake-out moments later, it ruins the tension of the story and undermines any real emotional impact from any other deaths that may occur.
Because this is the worst I've ever been treated, all right, man? You're acting like I'm some kind of bullet magnet. Well, you know what? Screw you, pal!
A death is an important thing. It can signal great change in a character or be used to drive up the tension in a scene. And when that death feels like it can come at any moment, at any time, it feels threatening and it allows that tension to build as the audience will be unsure of what to expect next. When the deaths of characters are so easily telegraphed that they are called by scene 1, there's no sitting on the edge of your seat, but rather waiting until what you expect to happen happens. So how do you fix the aforementioned choice from Gears 5? First, deaths are permanent and not to be toyed with. Gears of War has always been a series unafraid to shy from the brutality of war and the loss that comes with a conflict that spans the globe.
Oh, God. Dad. Oh, come on, Dad. Dad! Dad! Damn it!
In Gears of War 4, Marcus dies. He's not faked for a short moment to play with the audience, he dies. His story is done. The legend of the cog saved humanity. But there's a new threat, and one more dangerous than that which came before. This is not to say that because Marcus died that JD and crew will suddenly be better fighters than the old cog, and fight the new swarm no problem. But it establishes them as dangerous and a faction of enemy that our protagonists are nowhere ready to deal with en masse. In Gears 5, JD's dark streak is not caused by the death of another Carmine that is suspiciously never mentioned, but by the pain of being a now orphaned son in a world heating up on the brink of war. The story of Gears 5 can now focus on what Kate and her connection to the Locust means for humanity, but also what JD becomes to be the perfectly oiled machine that his father was 30 years ago, in order to combat the swarm. He is not perfect from the get-go, but is climbing the mountain of improvement. By the end of Gears 5, there is no contrived choice over which character means more to you for shock value. Del is killed. His purpose in the story was to remind Kate of her humanity and keep her from being swayed by Mira's will. His final act of proving the goodness in people is by saving Kate, rescuing her, and sacrificing himself before JD and Kate even come back together. This is where I'd make the greatest change to drive home the change that JD undergoes to become a better, stronger war machine, and Kate's arc to find a reason to fight for everyone, not just those that she loves. Have Del be dead before the final act. Kate is broken. JD is distraught, maybe even blaming himself for the death of a lifelong friend. And as established through Queen Reyna, the swarm can augment and use human corpses. So in the final act, instead of a pointless 3-click button fight against a worm stolen right from Gears of War 2 with this awkward sacrifice for Jack, the rejoined pair of JD and Kate instead find Del, tormented and changed to be a mocking beast of the swarm, a symbol of regret and pain for our protagonists.
Dumb.
No, no, no. No, baby. No, 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 no.
This is now a test as you have two clashing ideologies go at it. Kate, now a supreme empath, wants to attempt to subdue the creature, thinking that they might be able to do something for Del, maybe even just to mercy kill him. JD, the soldier who has been training to never let what happened to his father again happen, is seeing failure come true. He failed the second time. The newly buffed out JD wants nothing more than to lay into the beast and rip it limb from limb as an expression of anger manifested into hatred against these monsters that have taken so much from him. It is not a perfect solution, and I will by no means assert that I am some master-minded writer for the ages, but I hope you understand how I mean that just the smallest attitude and use of death can make a big change to justify character motivations and arcs throughout the whole of a story. Thank you very much for listening. Stay cool, have fun, be awesome, and have a good night.
That could have happened to anybody.